Hey, everybody. As you all know, public speaking is the biggest fear of anybody. So Sanjali has graciously volunteered to introduce tonight's speaker, a Cal grad, and something you may not know, but our speaker tonight was in the inaugural Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology class, which is really kind of cool. I don't think we've ever had anybody from that inaugural class speak. Might have been Andrew LaFoon, might have been in it, but he did not speak. So there you go. Sanjali, congratulations, thank you, and let's hear it.
Hi, everyone. There's someone in this room today who can control your mind. That's right, I'm being serious. Without even noticing, they can make your heart rate slow down. They can make your eyelids get heavy and your stress just melt away. And this honestly seems like witchcraft, especially with midterms around the corner. But no, we did not book a magician or a hypnotist or a snake charmer, but we booked someone even more powerful. The person I'm talking about built an app that can make millions of people around the world relax with just one tap on their phone. We're talking about Calm. But let's be honest for a second, none of us are calm right now. This is incredibly exciting. We're stressed, we're caffeinated, we have a lot of things going on. The entire day has been very exciting. But this is perfect because now we get to learn from someone who has the best experience and literally designs Calm for a living. Jon Tien has built a career on the crossroads of technology, media, and human experience. The chief product officer at Calm, he's led teams and built products that don't just keep you glued to your screen, but actually give you your peace of mind and time and energy back. That's basically the opposite of 99% of Silicon Valley. He started out at the Boston Consulting Group before jumping to the startup world as CEO of Kitchen Surfing. From there, he worked at Zynga, helping launch and scale some of its biggest titles, including leading product and growth for the original Farmville game pre-launch to its peak, and in the process shaping much of how product works at Zynga. He later joined the New York Times, leading the change in how millions of readers connect with journalism in the digital age. Now, as CPO at Calm, Jon brings all that expertise together to design products that don't just capture attention, but give you back your attention. And here's the kicker. Calm isn't just an app. It's a movement. Jon's job is to take silence, stillness, and rest, the three things Gen Z and us as students are the worst at, and Silicon Valley isn't as great at either, and make them not only accessible, but incredibly engaging. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna practice Jon's job description really quick. Can we all close our eyes, roll our shoulders back, and take a deep breath in and out. Another one in and out. Now, please join me in welcoming the real mind control power holder, Calm's Chief Product Officer, Jon Tien.
So tickled to have you here.
Do you do events? Because I would just love to have you introduce me that way everywhere I go.
It was a great introduction. Thank you very much. I have to say, the bar was raised at our first class, and it's just continued to be high. And students are just the best introducers.
It's an incredible job. Very much appreciated.
Hey, so you haven't had the most calm trip over here today. Just wondering if you could kind of share with us what your trip was like and what you did to help yourself before you're in front of all these students talking.
Let's see. I had a flat tire and then got in a lift that for some reason took a diversion to go get gas while I was in the car, and then proceeded to experience all of the lovely Bay Area traffic across a number of highways. Took about an hour and a half, kind of door to door. So it was fun.
Sometimes there's an expression that the cobbler's children don't have shoes. I am curious, as head of product for Calm, what do you do when you're in a situation like that? I know it couldn't have been calming.
Honestly, I think my favorite thing to do, as sort of prescribed in the app, is just breathing exercises. It's sort of like the simplest thing. You don't have to think about. You don't even need. Frankly, you don't need calm. Once you learn how to do it. I think that's probably the one that works the best for me.
What breathing exercise? Which one? Which of the many types do you have? One that you go to?
I think the simplest is 4 seconds in through the nose, kind of like slight hold, and then 6 seconds.
That would be
exhale.
box breathing.
Yeah.
We use it in class. Now I heard a new one recently, like 2 quick. We will talk about your career in a minute.
Of course.
2 quick ins and long out.
Is that the Huberman one? The
yes.
one that was
is
like.
that what it is?
I think he
all right.
really pushed it as like if you're trying to go to sleep, that like activates your body, your brain and body to kind of go to sleep. But, yeah.
Isn't it funny? Activate to go to sleep. Well, I mean, all of them do activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which really will calm you down. So as you all are going into midterms, if you can take a moment to do some box breathing, you don't even have to let anybody know you're doing it. Kind of do it on the sly, on the side. Jon, I wanted to talk with you for about half an hour about your career and some learnings.
Sure.
And then I wanted to open it up, as we usually do, to the students, because they really do have phenomenal questions. You found yourself here at a time when there was something new going on, and a new course taught by John Bergstone at the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at a time when, let's see, 2001 bubble had kind of burst. I don't think entrepreneurship was as sexy. Can you put us into that situation? What was it like, and why the heck did you start doing these classes?
Sure. I'm happy to talk a little bit about kind of my journey at Berkeley. And actually, maybe the most seminal event was I arrived here fall, or I guess August of 2001. And a few weeks in, someone burst into my dorm room and said, someone just flew a plane into the World Trade Center, which was kind of an insane thing to really experience amongst a group of people I didn't really know. And so that kind of maybe like set off my time at Berkeley on a little bit of a strange note. But as I kind of got more accustomed to campus, I really loved kind of the energy of everything. It was a little bit of a shock and awe for me. Because as it turns out, it was really hard. I had a high school experience where I didn't feel like I had a lot of trouble with a lot of the classes. And then I got to Berkeley, and that was a really rude awakening that it turns out I had learned nothing about physics in 4 years of high school, and Physics 7A was incredibly hard. And I arrived on campus as someone that didn't really know what they wanted to do. I think that's probably the case for most people that get here, and frankly, the case for most people, as was the case with me, by the time I left campus. And I arrived on campus as an EECS major. I have no idea why I was an EECS major. Well, actually, really the only reason why was because my dad was an electrical engineer, and he just said, you should be an EECS major. It's the hardest one. He was right. It was really hard. And I remember my freshman year, spring semester, I was sitting in a CS61C class. I don't know if these course names are still the same, about operating systems. And I just had 1,000-yard stare, kind of listening to the lecture. And I really had this moment. I was like, what am I doing? I don't care about any of this. I have no idea what he's talking about.
Sorry, I felt the need to put you up there.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, that is me at graduation, without a haircut in 7 months, actually. And actually, I made the decision, and probably in my young life, one of the best decisions I ever made was I decided to transfer out of EECS into industrial engineering and operations research. And I did that after taking, I can't remember the course name now, but it was sort of like an exploratory engineering class that just exposed you to a bunch of different disciplines. And it's one that grabbed a hold of me. And I was really thinking about, with EECS, as I was taking the classes, it's like, well, some of this is interesting, a lot of it is not, and I really don't think I could be world class at this. And as I started to take the industrial engineering classes, they were still challenging and hard and exciting, but it kind of had a spark in my head that, hey, I really do think I could be world class at these things, whether it was a database class or a stochastic modeling class. And that actually continued as Jon Bergstone, I don't know if he's here, but he created this really amazing program that first of its kind at Berkeley. And I was just so excited about the idea of being able to be part of a class that had real practical experience in building businesses, and bringing in guests from industry that could talk to us about their real experiences. And so that really kind of set a course for me. Of course, I did not immediately go into entrepreneurship. I, like any good college student at that time that didn't know what they wanted to do, decided to go into management consulting, which was really a way to kick the can down the road and work with some really smart people on some hard problems, but ultimately kind of give myself a little bit of time to figure out what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So I'm going to flip it up a little bit. You have so many interesting pivots that you've taken, but I asked the students to give some feedback on something. So now you find yourself, after all these twists and turns, which maybe were planned or not planned, in this position when you're the chief product officer for Calm. I don't know if it's the only, but it was certainly the first unicorn in mental health. We're $2 billion now. You joined 2023, which I was going to say last year, but I guess it was 2 years ago. It's funny how time just flies. But I asked intentionally that that Jon kind of work with his team to come up with a survey on what you would ask students. It is and it has been a pretty disruptive technology to combine this idea of digital technology and mental health. And so I wanted you all to answer some questions and from your team on how you'd almost do user interface or user research. I don't know if there's a better way to set that up, but I was going to go through some of the questions.
Sure, absolutely.
So I don't know if you all saw this. About 30 of you answered. Let's see if I have this up here. But Jon's team kind of asked a bunch of open-ended questions. How, what, a lot of what's, a lot of hows. How you think about stuff, digital hygiene. I loved, one student was like, what the heck is that? So what is digital hygiene from your perspective?
Digital hygiene, yeah, maybe a little bit of an industry term, but it's really like the idea of what is your relationship with your device and screens like? I think pretty much for most people today, you're on your phone for probably like several hours a day. You're probably on your phone for longer than is really healthy for you. Probably at times that maybe you don't want to, but maybe you if you were to kind of step out of yourself, you wouldn't want to be like right before you go to bed, scrolling something that's like very highly stimulating, like a TikTok and Instagram or what have you, like not really the best to put your brain in a space to go to sleep. There's ways that it also impacts your relationships and, times when you should be focused on the person that's right in front of you, that maybe you're kind of distracted by notifications going off on your phone. And so digital hygiene is about being conscious about how you use your devices, when you use your devices, and kind of the relationship that you establish with them. And it's kind of interesting as someone that has spent a career in building digital experiences for the web and your phone, and in many cases building experiences that were sort of designed to be pretty addicting. Coming to the place and time that we are now, where I think it's pretty clear to the evidence is all there. There's books about this, Jonathan Haiding's Generation, of how potentially damaging that could be. And I think there's certainly going to be a moment, if it's not already here, but in a few years, where we sort of look at the mobile phones and social media and this whole era in a way that's maybe not dissimilar to how we now look at, say, like cigarettes, that we just didn't know what we didn't know. And now we know, maybe unlike cigarettes, that there are some beneficial things about your mobile phone and social media and staying connected to people, getting information, but doing that in a completely unbounded way with no sort of training for the human on how do you do that in a disciplined way can be really dangerous.
Yeah. So that's one of the questions that you'd ask. And there are more questions in here also. How you all use apps, mental wellness, and unmet needs. I put this up here intentionally because it's very rarely that we get such direct learnings. You kind of have to make up the patterns yourself from listening to everybody. But if there's a chance that you all can look at that survey and you might even be able to use it for products that you're trying to think of. Sorry, John.
No worries.
It's called creative copying. It might be interesting. And so the last questions, so future exploration, was what's one thing you wish companies understood better about Gen Z? And if you could design one feature to improve your mental health or relationship, what would it be? I think these are two trick questions, like the superpowers secret sauce questions. Whenever you're asking for feedback, it is so hard to ask, like, what do you think I could have done better? And that's what could have been in here, but it was so nice to see what's one thing that can be done. So when you're asking for feedback on your products or yourself or your interview, this trick of asking for one thing is going to set you up for success, I think.
Yeah.
But I thought this was interesting. I took just a couple of the answers. Maybe you all will recognize what's the one thing you wish companies understood better about Gen Z and mental health or mental wellness. Wish companies today understood the struggle of Gen Z. If this is your question and you want to, if this is your answer and you want to say it, please let me know. In terms of how difficult it is to make a livelihood in today's market and build products to help us become more mentally stable in such a harsh climate and make things more affordable. Whew, it's a lot. You want to read the second one?
This one.
Yeah.
That even if we are young, nowadays society is made in a way that pushes people to burn out way earlier than before and more frequently.
And we're screen addicts. Anything there surprise you?
I don't think anything surprising. I would love to sort of dig into that second one of like what are the forces that are sort of pushing towards burnout sooner and more frequently.
Do you want to take a few minutes? We have
Sure,
this
I'm happy to understand that,
opportunity to do that. We'll try it with you all if you all are comfortable. Anybody willing to talk about that? Or John, you want to ask again? What?
Yeah, I just
into it?
kind of just want to understand what it sort of says in general. Kind of like nowadays society is pushes people towards burnout faster. Like what tangibly, what is that? What are the things that sort of push in that direction?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, thanks so much for Taiba for. Oh wait, let's do it with them. Or here, you come here and grab my mic. We just want everybody to hear. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Finn. I actually study neuroscience, so I think all this is really interesting to me. Maybe a more broad answer to what exactly about society pushes us towards burnout. I feel that it may actually be the high quantity of options. The idea that back when I was younger and I had my first phone, there were only 4 games on it, whereas now there are so many. Not only is there one social media platform, but there are many types that feeds you different kinds of pressure or ideas or news. So it's almost the abundance that is a double-edged sword.
That's great to hear. And I should start by saying, I am sure that I'm not the only person that has been here that has had the question in their head of like, how do Gen Z, how do they think about this product? How do I crack that market? That's a question that's being asked in like literally every major technology company in America and in the world. And so thanks for humoring me in that. And I think that the sort of abundance and paralysis of choice is certainly, it's a thing that we're very aware of at Calm. And a thing that we often hear from our users is more guidance. Like, don't give me all the choice. Just tell me what to do. And I think that kind of the tell me what to do aspect of the product is both very simplistic in a way, but it's also really hard to do. So, behind, for instance, the dopamine slot machine that is TikTok or Instagram that keeps you endlessly scrolling is there's only one thing that you're supposed to do with those apps. You keep scrolling. Maybe you stop to like or comment. But that is an on-rails experience. They've collected enough information from you upfront in who you follow, maybe a little bit of onboarding, who your interests are, your social graph, and then building on that, all the signals they get from, your dwell time on a post, whether you liked or commented on a post, what did you engage with more recently, that just keeps you pulled in to that experience, whether that's the main feed or the For You or what have you. And that is one way of doing no, there's no choice, right? It's all kind of there for you. And perhaps a reason why those products are particularly successful, not just with the Gen Z market, but with sort of a broad market, is they've really cracked that there's no choice. You just kind of do one thing. And I think a lot of companies are looking to emulate that, maybe in a healthier way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm going to keep on going a little bit, just in the interest of time, and if you all want to talk a little bit more about it. But I think it's important that also, as we think about new products and bringing things out, that you have a conversation with your users. Yep. And I just wanted to do that live, and I thank you. I didn't tell you I was going to do that, so I appreciate that you are humoring me with that. But I do want to go back a little bit, because as cool as it is what you're doing now, if I go back a little, you have had this incredible career. BCG, yeah, I know you made it sound like, what no one wants to do. It's, we all know it's really hard to get hired by BCG. But then you went to Zynga. I just was wondering if you could kind of go back, kind of take us through some of these decisions that led you to what you're doing now.
Sure, and I think the BCG one is actually rather interesting. Because if there's maybe to the extent that some of this is about, what are some things I've learned in my life and career that I would wish to impart? One of them is just go for it. When I was recruiting for consulting companies in 2004,
only 2 decades ago.
Yeah, there were only of the big three. Only Bain recruited on campus. The BCG took out an ad in the Daily Cal and said, if you're interested, send your resume to this generic recruiting email address. And I did, and I pushed, and I ultimately got a job there. I think I was actually the only person to get an offer from BCG that year. And the next year, they asked me to go to Stanford to do recruiting. And I said, I will only do that under one condition, which is that you send me out a day early, and I will sit in Brood Awakening on Euclid Street. I don't know if it's still there. I've spent hundreds of hours.
Isn't Brood Awakening still there on Euclid? Maybe not.
Maybe not. There was a coffee shop in Euclid I spent hundreds of hours in. And I sat there with an associate of mine, and we did 8 hours, and we met with every single candidate that had an interview the next day, just to do a case run through. Because when I was at BCG, there were all these associates from Harvard and MIT and Yale and Princeton, because I went to the office in Boston. And I realized that all these people had case prep from the time they were sophomores in college. And I was like, well, we didn't have any of that. And people at Berkeley are really smart. And I bet just given a little bit of the same tools that private universities are able to offer, we're getting the same result. That year, there were, I think, 5 offers to students from Berkeley, just sort of 1 year later. And so, both of those are just if you see something that you think is right, just go for it. When I decided to leave BCG, this was kind of August 2008. I finished about 3 years there. Everyone in my cohort was like, I'm going to business school, I'm going to private equity. I said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to quit, and I'm going to move back to the Bay Area. I'm going to get a job with a startup. And they said, what? Because at that time, in 2008, no one in that sphere was doing that. It was a sort of very conservative culture of there's a track. You do consulting, you do private equity, you do business school, and then you do your next thing. And there was a little bit of truth to this because, maybe some of you are too young to remember this, and at least you were born. In September of 2008, a month after I left, was really the start of the big crash. So Lehman Brothers distributed this RIP Good Times, or Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy, Sequoia distributed this RIP Good Times deck, and it was basically the end of hiring at startups for quite a while.
Just want to say that one more time. R.I.P. Rest in peace, good times. It was bad news.
Yeah, in many ways, the vibe of that time was not so different than this past couple of years. Like, well, the ZERP era is over, and 996 culture's here, which is a horrible idea. And I just ended up taking a longer break than I expected, but landed at a company called Zynga. I never thought I would get into games. I frankly didn't even know what product management was, and was just sort of brought in because they thought I was a smart person. It was an experiment where I didn't know anything about product. I'd never built technology products. I'd never worked on games. I was an experiment to see, can we teach this person how to do product? And a year and a half later, I was the head of product of the company. And I mean, it didn't happen magically. I mean, there were incredibly hard times, probably the hardest I've ever worked. For a period of time, I would probably wake up at 5 a.m. every day, start running a data report that would take an hour to run, and then I'd go into a coffee shop because I didn't want to go into the office at 6 a.m. But then I would start doing analysis, and I would finish my workday at midnight or 1, go home and sleep for a few hours, and I did that 7 days a week for about 100 days, and then I completely had a meltdown. But then it was all fine.
How'd you get out of the meltdown?
I took a break from the team that I was on.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say this is a testament to my work, but after maybe like 6 weeks, they kind of begged me to come back. And so I went back, and by that time, we were able to reset some of the things that were not so healthy about the way that we were doing things. And in many ways, this is, if you work in technology products, there are particular times that are really intense.
Yeah.
Building up to the launch of a product, the immediate aftermath of the launch of a product tend to be really intense times, and that's what I was going through. It's really like a product manager that had no experience and no tools, just kind of figuring it out on my own.
I mean, Farmville was like the biggest there was at the time.
Yeah,
thought.
Farmville was kind of a runaway hit in ways that we didn't fully anticipate. And that was a combination of the game that we built, but also some really critical business decisions and product decisions that we made about integrations with the Facebook platform and the way we did advertising. So there was a lot into it.
After you had incredible success there, then you went to another startup on the other coast again.
Yeah. So
Well, maybe there was something in between.
No, that was it.
Yeah.
I did nearly 5 years at Zynga, and spent most of my time on the leadership team, kind of working across all different product teams and kind of being the voice for product. And after 4.5 years, the company went public. It went from 150 people when I joined to 3,200 people at peak. At one point, I had 250 PMs. There was actually a really funny moment where we met with Facebook a lot. And I met with a guy who's still there, Chris Cox, is a head of product at Facebook. And he said, how many PMs do you? He's kind of like, hey, let me mentor you, let me help you. So how many PMs do you have? I was like, we have like 250. He said, oh, that's a lot more than we have. And so it was an incredible time. But ultimately, I got to a point at Zynga where I didn't want to make games the rest of my life. And I think there's a way to kind of approach your career, particularly early on, where you can kind of be agnostic, right, to exactly the thing that the company does. It can be about learning and building skills, working with really good people. And that it can be true for a pretty long time, but it can't be true forever. At least that's what I found for me. And so I left Zynga because the job was loving making games. Like if that was a necessary precondition for the job that I had, and if I wanted to enjoy it, if I wanted to go any farther, that had to be true. And while I like games, I don't love games. And that really was clarifying for me. And in many ways, not dissimilar from sitting in CS61C with a 1,000-yard stare thinking, I will never be world class at this, and trying to find something that I would be. And so I went off on a journey. I did sort of an eat, pray, love thing and traveled around the world. And I found myself on a pig farm in southwest France, butchering pigs and making charcuterie. And eventually found myself to kitchen surfing. I know that wasn't in the bio,
No, it's totally fine. I was wondering, I figured there had to be some weird transition thing. And if whether that has to be pork farming or whatever, that almost makes more sense.
Yeah. And so I ultimately ended up making friends with the founder of Kitchen Surfing, who after a few months of me working with them as an advisor, asked me to take over the company as a CEO, which wasn't what I had set out to do. I'd sort of just set out to, I want to find a company where I feel like my skills can be really leveraged, and that I am truly passionate about.
John, what is kitchen surfing, or what do they do?
Yeah, sure. Kitchen surfing is no longer around, but it was a few things. It was a marketplace of private chefs that ultimately became a service business of a chef coming to your home and preparing a meal for your family.
So what's interesting about that is that you were there until 2019. I feel like, is that not quite right?
Not quite right, but yeah.
I guess if you could have stayed a little bit longer, it just seems like that would have been the perfect kind of business during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's, these things come in waves. So sometimes you get like the right idea at the wrong time.
Yeah.
There's, when we were doing kitchen surfing, there were two kind of predominant waves in technology, in consumer technology, and one was the on-demand wave.
Yeah.
Which, of course, the joke was like, the VCs of Silicon Valley are subsidizing this lifestyle for everyone, where all these services are done for you very cheaply. And then the other was a food tech wave. There were sort of like Blue Apron and Munchery and a few others. Sprig, I think, was out here.
Yeah.
And those were really hot waves for like a couple of years. And then there were some turns of the tide, largely driven probably by what was the observed performance of Uber and Lyft, and the focus turning to unit economics. And how could you make this not just a business that could grow by deeply discounting the service and giving a lot away, but actually be profitable?
Yeah.
And so the wave quickly turned to that, and we found a way to make the business profitable, but it probably wasn't a venture scale business. It wasn't a business that, a venture capital a firm could put a couple $1 million into, that turns into, $1 billion business.
Yeah. Which is too bad, because it just sounded like a kind of cool idea. What happened to bring you back to the coast then? This coast, the best coast.
Well, I spent a number of years at the New York Times, which was also
right. Yes,
on the East Coast. And I had a great time at the New York Times. I experienced a pandemic there.
So that's what I do think is interesting. Here, I mean, I felt like, in a weird way, the New York Times grew in all sorts of ways during the pandemic.
Yeah, the pandemic was an incredible time for the New York Times, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but the New York Times is very conscious of this, and like it's not something that they're proud of or celebrate, but they also understand that bad news is kind of good for business, because there are times when people seek out information, they want to be more educated, and so that was a time in which the business of the New York Times grew quite a lot. And that's actually true for a lot of businesses. I mean, as people found more time and disposable income, and maybe also were more stressed and anxious, they looked to lots of products to kind of fill that gap, to spend with that disposable income. Calm was actually one of those. Calm grew a lot during the pandemic. because of both those reasons, but also because of the need of
Yeah.
people feeling stressed and anxious about what was happening.
What were you doing at the New York Times? Like, what was your area? What were you focused on?
So I ran what's called the engagement mission, which is a complicated way of saying it's basically everything you would imagine to be the digital experience of the news of the New York Times, so not cooking, not games. Everyone thinks I did Wordle. I didn't do Wordle.
I'm so sorry you didn't.
I helped with Wordle. But so the New York Times app,
Yeah.
the web homepage and story pages of the New York Times, the tools that the newsroom used to publish the report, some of the innovations between the newsroom and technology products, all the emails and newsletters that you received from the New York Times, that was sort of all my teams.
What's interesting about your career path and also some of the other career paths, we had somebody speaking last week on a webinar, and he'd invested in like everything from broadcast to now he's doing drugs and he or healthcare, I should say, and basketball. I mean, a lot of different areas.
Sure.
And not that differently, I am comparing you to Mark Cuban a little bit, just a little bit. Here you are doing consulting and then gaming and then food services and then media. And then the Calm app. How did that happen?
I would love to be known as the Mark Cuban of Berkeley.
Yeah,
I maybe we can make that happen. Someone tweet it out. I think it's, one, I kind of always seeked out consumer experiences that I personally could resonate with. And that's just something that for me, I don't think I'll be at my best until I can put myself in the position of a user, really. But it is kind of a strange journey on its face, and I think represents a couple of things, and one is maybe a level of irrational confidence or naivete that I could go into something and just learn it and figure it out. I went into games and never made games. I was a good home cook that took over a food tech company. Actually went into people's homes and cooked food.
It takes a lot of confidence in New York, by the way, just going into a stranger's home, but go ahead.
I was the first online editor of my high school newspaper, but that was about the extent of my my experience with journalism. And I really had no experience with meditation and mindfulness until I joined Calm. And so, there's some aspect of just kind of confidence that I could come in and learn something and understand it well enough to drive it forward. And some of that is like I always take what I think to be like a casual person's approach towards the subject matter to ensure that if we're trying to make this a mass market product, we're not making games for the people that play World of Warcraft, right? At Zynga, like we're not, the readership of the New York Times is maybe different than the Atlantic or Harper's Bazaar or what have you. And similarly, like if you are a self-taught practitioner of meditation, you're probably not using the Calm app, right? It's for maybe a different audience. But I also try to balance that with some humility of understanding there are things I don't know. There are reasons why the craft of game making or the craft of journalism or the craft of teaching mindfulness, they take years of training. They've gone through decades of honing things or methods or processes that really work, and taking the time to try to understand that and then bridge the gap between those two. Like where are maybe some of the assumptions wrong? When, for instance, if before games came sort of mass market online, they were predominantly physical goods that you would buy. Like you would go to, I grew up in the Bay Area, I went to Fry's Electronics a lot, I don't know if that's still around. And you'd go buy a cartridge, right? Maybe it had a disc in it or an Xbox game. And you paid $50 for it and you walked home and you felt good about it. And when you put that disc in the machine, you'd often go through an onboarding experience that was 25 steps long, showed you every part of the game. Well, that's based on conventional wisdom of like, what do you have to teach someone that buys $50 worth of digital content on a disc? But when you translate the medium and put it online, and you have a much different user base coming online, you can't put them through a 25-step tutorial. They just want to figure out what's here. And so what works there is not a 25-step tutorial, it's like a one-step tutorial.
Yeah.
And so it's finding those places where you're turning the logic, or you're maybe questioning the logic and saying, well, now that we're doing this in a different way, a different platform, a different medium, different device, different time, what are the things that need to change to actually adapt this craft that has come up around over decades to a more modern time? And that's been one of the commonalities of kind of how I've worked across all of these industries. They've all been consumer experiences. They've all been, in many ways, content-oriented. And they all involve this sort of, somewhat of like a well-established craft that is undergoing some level of modernization to better fit the audience of today, the devices of today, the climate of today.
Yeah. It's just interesting that you could do that in every case. I mean, you did that, and not that New York Times is a startup, but in a way, the digital side of the Times was also a startup. And you're coming in, like 8 years, I can't even think of exactly, I can't do the math, after Calm had started also, and trying to take them even larger. So
that's right.
Just fascinating. I want to open it up to questions from you all. I do have more questions if you don't have questions, but it's always best to hear from you all. So I thank you for taking us through so far. And Haley and Taiba will start to hand out those microphones. If I can ask you all just to like hold your hand up just like you're doing, that's awesome. And introduce yourself so John can also see you. So thank you for going through that, John.
Okay, I can go. Hi, John. My name is Haley. I'm studying cognitive science, computer science, and design. And I'm really, really interested in the product management field. So your experiences as Zynga and Calm are really, really inspiring to me. But I was just wondering, since you are Chief Product Officer at Calm, which is a really, really fascinating company to me, I'm just wondering if you have any specific skills that you think are vital to entering the product management space, especially as someone who's currently an undergraduate right now?
It's a great question. I think you'd probably be hard-pressed to enter into any product management position and not have like a baseline ability of quantitative analysis and just like understanding how to look at user data and kind of tease out insights on what's happening. So certainly that's one. I think a class I took here that there were a couple of classes like really, I think, gave me some practical knowledge, and those were sort of like various statistics classes and a database class, relational databases. And both of those sort of like kind of just trained my mind about like how to think about data. So that's certainly one. There's probably some level of I think I also took like an industrial design class, of which is maybe one flavor of design, or looking at why are things the way that they are, and kind of figuring out how to ask the right questions. One thing you could even kind of do yourself is take your favorite products, right, and start to dissect them. Like put yourself in the position of someone that has to build and make this product. What are their goals, right? Okay, like an Instagram or a TikTok, they're an ad-based business. The more minutes they get out of you, more hours they get out of you, the more ad views that they have. The more signals that they get about personalization from you, the better they can target those ads. And so then, given that those are their goals, like, oh, maybe I understand why they like change the algorithm from just the people that you follow to be more algorithmic. Or why certain things are a scrolling swipe versus like a locking swipe. So I think things like that are just like training your mind to question, why did they do things this way, and try to come to kind of your own conclusion. Really helpful. And certainly classes like this that sort of put that into practice, really helpful.
Yeah, practice critical thinking. Yeah, who's next?
Hi, John. My name is Mohammed. I'm a senior studying data science. As talked about, your experience showcases a variety of industries throughout your career, and you mentioned being confident as you stepped into each of these new industries. Do you have a specific phrase or saying that you tell yourself before you go into the new company or industry that to build up that confidence?
Do I have a phrase I say to myself?
Or like a saying?
Or song that you use to get pumped?
I don't know. Like, I mean, like for music, I think certainly like anything that you would listen to pump yourself up for like the gym, like probably works pretty well for that. I don't know. Like I think I like to, before I go into anything new, so one kind of like retread my journey, right? Like, what are the things that I've accomplished to date, and not to like toot my own horn or anything like that, but just like recognize, just be proud of the things that I've done, and that certainly helps give me confidence of like, hey, I've done this before, right? I also like to rerun like, what are the things I do differently, and make sure I sort of carry those learnings in. And then I almost never go into a new job without a plan. Like that plan could be wrong, right? But I like to come in with a hypothesis, and then usually, if the time allows for it, I tell most people like, don't expect me to do anything, don't expect me to make a decision for at least 30 days, like because anything that I tell you is probably going to be wrong. Like I need to come in with enough humility to understand that I need to take the time to understand why have decisions been made the way that they are? Why are people working on the things that they're working on? And kind of do a listening tour and sort of build my own understanding of what am I coming into? And that's part of that balance, right? Of being confident coming into something, but also being humble and understanding that I've got things to learn. I've learned something at every stop along the way.
That's lovely. You all are responsible. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Fareed. I'm actually doing a master's in product development, so I was inspired by so many aspects that you mentioned, especially about like learning why things are specifically done. And I wonder if you could share with us maybe some things that felt kind of illogical to somebody looking at something, and then you figure out that I'm supposed to do it like completely the other way around, or the opposite way, something that was interesting to you from your journey.
Sure. I'll maybe actually build on an example I gave before. So I gave the example before of, hey, if you bought like an Xbox game, you'd go through this like 25-step tutorial, be like an hour before you actually started to play the game, and that can't be the way it works in casual games that you play on your phone, or at the time when I was at Zing on Facebook. And we actually ran tests that were taking these like 11-step tutorials, and there were multiple variants. There was like okay, what if we made it from 11 to 9? What if we made it from 9 to 7? What if we made it from 7? And just for fun, we put in a one-step tutorial. Literally just like click one button and start playing the game. And lo and behold, the one-step tutorial was the winner. And I had sort of carried that as a little bit of conventional logic through a lot of my time. And over the past couple of years, actually, I've come to see things in a little bit of a different way. And you might notice actually a lot of apps that you download now have what we call the longboarding, which is a very long quiz.
You all call it the longboarding.
That's not
the insider term.
Yes, correct. Right. Yeah. And it's like a quiz that asks you a ton of questions to help get to know you.
Oh, for onboarding. Sorry, it took me a while because longboarding is also
surfing, not skateboarding, but it serves a few purposes. The obvious one is, hey, the more information that an app collects about you up front, the better they can personalize the experience, the more likely you are to convert, the more engaging the app is going to be. But one thing we've come to learn is, one, the patience of users today to actually go through that. The drop off at every usually it's like conventional logic has been every step you add, you're gonna lose people. So just like minimize the number of steps you need to get to the thing that you need to get to. I think that's starting to change, and we've actually seen there's some cases where there's very little drop off at any given step, and actually there potentially are questions that you add that make it longer that maybe you're not even using for personalization, but that change the perception of your product, that make someone more invested in it. And that's like, this is literally something that I've picked up in the last year that I think we're still trying to figure out how to put into action. We're certainly, like with the sleep app, we have a longer onboarding right now that asks you more questions about you because we're personalizing experience based on your answers. But that's one example of like, I've kind of gone both ways on that, where early on it was make it as short as possible, get someone to the action. But now that's not the obvious answer. It's not that a long onboarding is the answer always, but we've seen that user behavior has changed a bit, and now there's a little bit more room for that.
Hi. Testing. Okay, great. Hi, John. I'm Claire. I'm a sophomore here studying cognitive science, and Calm a couple years back was the start of like my meditation journey, so super meaningful to hear you talk about this. I'm very curious. We've talked about a couple roles that you went into with maybe not a lot of background in those fields. What do you think, from kind of like a hiring standpoint, made you stand out as a candidate for these jobs that maybe you didn't have a lot of background in, whether it was experience in other fields or kind of qualities across the board?
You know, I don't think there's one simple answer to that. I'll give an example maybe from the New York Times. I had like very long discussions with the New York Times. It was probably like a 7-month process of just meeting various people there. And the CEO will say, like, there was one moment at which she thought this is the person. And all I did is I took maybe half an hour to an hour. And I took out a notebook and I wrote down a bunch of questions, like just questions and ideas. And then I kind of like honed it and whittled it down a little bit. And I sat down with her and like a coffee shop and said, hey, let me just like walk you through some ideas I have. And I walked her through like 10 ideas. And some of them were probably horrible. Some of them were actually right on. And that for her was like the moment where she's like, I want this person to come in and lead teams. And there's just like a bit of like proactivity of thinking where don't wait for someone to tell you what to do, right? And some advice I got early on in my career was like, always try to do your boss's job, right? Put yourself in their position, think through the challenges that they're facing, and think about what would you do? And how would you do some of that work for them? And you could be wrong, right? But I think that's another thing. Just don't be afraid to be wrong. Like put it out there, right? And just you taking the initiative, I think is a demonstration of what would it be like if you were in that job, right? That you're going through this thought process, you're taking the initiative. It doesn't matter if the answers are wrong. It's just that you're actually doing it and putting yourself in their shoes.
Awesome, thank you.
Who's next?
Me? Hi. Hello. My name is Favor. Here.
Yeah, right there.
Thank you.
An exchange student in the SCET program. And it's funny because when you spoke about 61C, I'm taking that course right now and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? So
Don't tell the instructor I said that.
Wait, who's the instructor? Wonder if it's the same.
it's Dan Garcia.
Oh, Dan's nice. It's not the
I
same.
don't think it's the same.
Not the same.
Okay. So essentially, my question is about your journey. You've pivoted different fields, and I'm in this period of my life where I'm not too sure what I want to do and where I want to go. You said you took the industrial design class, and that helped you know that was where you wanted to go. How do you think your life would have been if you did not take that class that could have guided you? And for some of us who don't have that clarity, what advice do you have to give?
I honestly have no idea. I mean, it was a real sliding doors moment in my life of like, maybe I would have failed out of EECS or something.
I think we need to explain what sliding doors is.
Sliding doors is like a fork in the road, a moment in your life where it could have gone one way or another, and because
It's based on a movie with Gwyneth Paltrow from I think the 90s. But
yeah, unfortunately. But so I don't know what the other path would have looked like. I think it was, you know, you guys are all young, right? I can't say that anymore, but there's time, like for me at that moment in my life, I was like 19 years old, and I felt like it was one of the first decisions I made completely for myself, completely based on my own understanding of who I was, what I was good at, and what I wanted to be and do. And I took a leap of faith and just did it. And, you know, it taught me like the value of going out and exploring. And, you know, earlier in life, it's, you know, there's sort of like a framework of being T-shaped, right? Like you want to be sort of have that breadth and learn about a lot of things. So you have a lot of breadth of knowledge. But then when you find those things that really resonate, they tickle your brain a little bit or tug at your heartstrings, just like fall down that rabbit hole and go super deep on it, and being able to do that as well. And I think like over your life and your career, you're just constantly building out that T. And early on, you're kind of going more broad. And then as you find those things, kind of going deep. So it taught me the value of exploration, and also just gave me a lot of confidence for myself in my ability to take control of my own life and make decisions for myself, and not be afraid of what could have been or what are the consequences of doing something that wasn't prescribed. So I don't know. It was a very important moment for me. I don't know what things would have been like the other way, but doesn't mean switch out of EECS. But like, you know, like I think that sort of generalized, like take the time to explore, right? You got a lot of time to figure out what you want to do. Like you're not on a track that has to be kind of only one single way, only at one pace.
I never think there's a right decision. There's just a whole bunch of decisions to make that you make great. And you just happen to make your decisions great. We have, I don't know if, 2 weeks ago, the speaker wanted to kind of stand up. I don't know if you feel more comfortable standing up, but we've got about time for 2 or 3 more questions. So I'll let you stand if you feel like it or not. Yeah, where's our mic?
I have the... So, hi John, thank you for the talk. I am Victor. I am founding a health tech startup, and I wanted to ask you your perspective. So, who do you think is the best founding CPO or the best person to take the product responsibility for an early stage startup? Like, it's an expert who has the problem, a designer, an engineer.
Did you say you're founding a startup?
Yeah.
Okay. And the question is, who is the best person to make product decisions? Or
yes, to take the roadmap and know the next features.
There's not a simple answer to that. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer to that. You know, product management exists for a reason, right? Like the role of product management is to scope, to prioritize, to keep things on track, to merge sort of like the business and technology decisions, and to sort of do that holistically with design, to understand users. There's a reason the job exists. When you're founding a startup, or when you are very early stage, all bets are off, right? Like roles and titles don't matter. I mean, like for you as a founder, I would ask you, like, are you crazy?
Yeah, sure.
No. Very honestly, like when I talk to founders, and like for instance, like, oh, come work at my company or whatever, I ask them like, what kind of crazy are you? I already know you're crazy, because there's absolutely no way the company would be in the position that it is today, where you were not completely irrational in some way or another. And so I think as a founder, you have to have like way more irrational confidence than me. You have to sweat the details of something in a particular way. And so I guess my answer to who should make product decisions, who should own the roadmap, you got to think about your product, right? Is it a highly technical product? Is it one that requires a deep understanding of how users are? Is it one that requires a deep understanding of how an industry works? Like, how does the healthcare payment system work? How does insurance work? How does manufacturing screws and bolts work, right? I mean, where is that deep knowledge going to lie? And where is someone within your team, maybe all of you, going to be completely irrational about this because you have an outsized advantage, you have outsized insight, you're going to work harder, you're going to care more about those product decisions that are going to make the company successful more than 99.999% of the earth. So, I mean, ask yourself that question and then maybe you'll have the answer.
John, I can't believe we're kind of toward the end of our time. I hope you will stay because I think we'll have students who still have questions. I have our code, and you'll get feedback from everybody from the talk tomorrow. I wanted more than anything just say thank you for your authenticity, your calmness, and a little bit of crazy.